Dr. Ken Berry has recently announced that he and several others are forming a new diabetes organization. Dr. Berry is clearly frustrated with the American Diabetes Association and their seeming paralysis to aggressively push a low-carb keto diet, and he's decided it's time to provide an alternative. His new organization will be called the American Diabetes Society, and it will emphasize the power of carbohydrate restriction to reverse and prevent diabetes. Well, I've heard of that before, haven't you? Some of the board members of this new nonprofit will include Dr. Eric Westman and Dr. Tony Hampton. Dr. Tony I have interviewed a couple of times on this channel. It's an exciting development, and I'll be watching it closely to see where it goes. Dr. Berry has posted a couple of videos about this new American Diabetes Society, and I'll put links to these in the description under this video. Now, before I say much more about the new organization, I want to share a few thoughts about the original American Diabetes Association. The first thing people need to know is that the ADA is not any more official than thousands of other organizations in the U.S. It is not a government entity. It's not supported by the U.S. government. It is a nonprofit formed back in 1940 by a group of 6 physicians. It's considered a charity, not so different from thousands of other American charities. The ADA's ideas, philosophy, recommendations, and their huge website were not given to Moses on Mount Sinai. Their concept of fixing diabetes is essentially the product of what Americans have considered healthy eating since around the 1960s, with some exercise thrown in. There have been some changes over the years, for sure, but those changes have come very slowly and in tiny little increments. Some may wonder, well, if the ADA is not an officially sanctioned U.S. organization, how did they get so big? Every week, thousands of newly diagnosed diabetics are referred to this organization by their doctors and are often given pamphlets written by somebody connected with the ADA. And there are few diabetics in America who have not heard of the ADA and probably read at least something that they have produced. One reason for the American Diabetes Association's vast influence is their money. They have a yearly budget of around $100 million, much of it donated by large food companies and large diabetic drug companies and insulin companies. They can promote themselves in a way that smaller organizations never could. And the fact that they've been around so long, well, it means they have simply outlived many of their rivals, and they're at the top of the heap among diabetes associations. A second reason that ADA has become so well known has to do with America's doctors. Sad to say, many doctors just don't have the time or the knowledge to try to help their patients in their diabetic struggles, and they will simply refer them to the American Diabetes Association. They'll tell their patients, go to the ADA website and you'll learn a lot about diabetes. Bam, done. Their job is over and now it's time to see the next patient. Well, actually, you can learn quite a bit about diabetes from the ADA website in terms of the nature of diabetes and the damage done by diabetes and the complications of diabetes. But what you do not learn is how to reverse diabetes. They will harp on the importance of exercise, and they'll tell you to eat a healthy diet, which to them means fruits and vegetables, whole grain breads, brown rice, sweet potatoes, and light amounts of very lean meat, chicken and fish preferably. They just seem to hate red, fatty meat. On their website, they list certain of what they call superfoods. And the ADA superfoods include beans, oranges, whole grains, such as whole grain breads, quinoa, oats, and barley. On one website, they share the ADA recommended diets, saying choose an eating plan, and then they give you choices: Mediterranean diet, DASH diet, vegetarian, or low carb, that works best for your personal food preferences and lifestyle. There's no evidence that one plan works better than another. Are you kidding me? No evidence that one works better than another? That's ridiculous. There is a mountain of evidence that a carb-restricted diet is vastly superior in reversing diabetes than any other diet that does not restrict carbs. While giving lip service to the low-carb diet as one possible way to eat, and they don't talk about it much, but they do occasionally mention it, but they'll go on to suggest that people should get their carbs from vegetables, whole grains, fruits, and legumes. Non-starchy vegetables are fine, in my opinion, but this idea of diabetics eating lots of whole grain bread, fruits, and legumes are not the answer for men and women who are about to lose their legs and their kidneys to this monstrous condition. And what is this DASH diet that they say is no better or worse than a low-carb diet? One website writes, to give you an idea of what the DASH diet would look like, a 1,600-calorie diet would include 6 servings of whole grains per day, 3 to 4 servings of vegetables, don't mention what kinds, 4 servings of fruits, 2 to 3 servings of low-fat milk products, 3 to 6 lean protein servings, and 2 fats and oils per day. So on the DASH diet, grains are the number one food you're going to eat. That's not a DASH diet. That's a how to become a diabetic diet. On the ADA website, they give this advice to diabetics. If you're looking for an easy place to start, then try following the diabetes plate method. First, grab a 9-inch plate. You'll want to fill half your plate with non-starchy vegetables, 1/4 of the plate of protein foods, and the last quarter of the plate with carbohydrate foods. They say, wondering if you can eat fruit? Yes, with an exclamation point. While fruit does count as a carbohydrate food, they are loaded with vitamins, minerals, and fiber just like vegetables. Fruit can also help you satisfy your sweet tooth without the added sugar. So fruit is fine, lots of fruit. An apple here, and a pear there, and a peach there, and a mango there. Well, the problem with the ADA is that they are stuck in some kind of a time warp. Their ideas, their philosophy, their dietary recommendations come from the 1970s and 80s. There was a time when I thought, well, if we just give them enough time, they'll come around. All of these testimonies of people reversing diabetes, all the thousands of diabetics who have brought their A1Cs from 10 or higher down into the 5s, well, that surely ought to convince them that the low-carb diet and its cousins, the keto, the ketovore, and the carnivore diets are superior to every other diet in the world. I figured they'll sooner or later see it. But folks, they have not come around. They barely acknowledge that low-carb could work for some. But you get the idea that even making that mild statement is done grudgingly, and it's actually painful for them to say or to write it. Meanwhile, diabetics are experiencing kidney failure, foot and leg amputations, and premature death, while we wait and wait for the ADA to finally acknowledge what many of us have figured out years ago. Cutting the carbs is the most powerful thing you can do to beat diabetes. I am no prophet, but I have a feeling this new American Diabetes Society, with its emphasis on carbohydrate restriction, is an idea whose time has come. There is a groundswell of tens of thousands of people all over the world who know from their own experience that slashing the carbohydrates in your diet, employing time-restricted eating, and focusing on meats and low-carb vegetables, and doing some moderate exercise, well, these things are going to bring such a reduction in glucose levels, it is shocking. It's almost hard to believe, and yet your glucose meter or your CGM will tell you day after day, again and again, this glorious news: you are winning the fight against diabetes. I don't know the future for this new low-carb organization, the American Diabetes Society, but knowing the doctors who are on their board, it has to be vastly superior to the stale, outdated, timid, lethargic, ineffective ADA, who write as though they had just stepped out of a time machine straight from 1975. If you want to beat diabetes, it's time to get radical. It's time to adopt a slash and burn strategy. Trash your MyPlate. Burn your Dash diet books. Give up your vain efforts to eat mountains of sweet potatoes and quinoa and whole grain bread. Run full speed toward a carb-restricted diet and watch your blood sugar levels normalize. As Adrian Monk might say, you'll thank me later. The question that so many people have about us is how in the world did you guys get to know each other? How did you get together? Well, the answer is found in Benedicta's new autobiography, When Destiny Calls. In fact, we do something in that autobiography that is almost never done. We each have a chapter sharing from our own perspective how we got together and how we first got to know each other. So she tells her side of it, I tell my side of it, and then it goes on with the rest of her autobiography. And the whole autobiography is exciting. It's a lot of drama and a lot of good stuff. But I think you'll find it interesting to know how it was that God brought us together. So there'll be a link in the description about how you can get this book on Amazon, either as an ebook or a paperback.